Today, we are diving into an absolutely epic story, one that stretches across thousands of years. It's this idea that there's a single, coherent master plan moving behind all the chaos of human history. So let me ask you this. What if the great empires we all learned about in school, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, what if they weren't just random cycles of power and conquest? What if every single one of them was a piece in a much, much bigger puzzle, all moving toward one ultimate divine goal? That's the huge idea we're going to unpack right now. Now, to get our heads around this grand design, we actually have to start small, really small. You can think of it like a prototype or a scale model for the main event. And that model was just a tiny little strip of land in the ancient world. And here we are. The story doesn't kick off with some globe-spanning empire. Nope. It starts with the land of Canaan. This was like the test kitchen, you know? It was meant to show God's big picture plan for the whole earth, but on a much more manageable scale. This right here is a foundational piece of the puzzle. Right from the get-go, God made one thing crystal clear. The land did not belong to the people of Israel. It was his. They were basically tenants or stewards, allowed to live there and work it, but they never, ever held the deed. And this is the crucial part, their lease agreement had a huge condition attached. Their right to even be there depended entirely on one thing: obedience to God's laws. If they followed the terms, they could stay, but if they rebelled, they'd be evicted. And as history tells it, that's exactly what happened, first by the Babylonians and then later by the Romans. But here's the twist. The failure of this scale model wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. In fact, it was the very thing that triggered the next, much bigger phase of the plan. And this new phase would play out over centuries, defined by a whole series of world-dominating empires. Now, this timeline comes from a really famous dream that King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had. It's all laid out in the book of Daniel. And what's amazing is that it foretold this exact sequence of empires that would rule the known world: Babylon, the head of gold, then Medo-Persia, then Greece, and then Rome. But the dream didn't stop there. It pointed to one final fifth kingdom, a stone kingdom, that would come and replace them all. You see, the failure of that first model showed a pretty serious flaw, not in God's plan, but in humanity's ability to hold up their end of the deal. So a whole new arrangement had to be put in place. It's called the New Covenant, and it completely changes the rules of the game. And look at this. The difference is night and day. The Old Covenant was all conditional. It started with the words, "if you will," putting all the pressure, all the responsibility on people. But the New Covenant? It's a promise. It starts with, "I will," shifting the entire burden of success onto God. And just look at the change in territory. We go from the little land of Canaan to the entire earth. Okay, so this is where things get really fascinating. You have to wonder, how could these powerful, often brutal and godless empires possibly be part of a divine plan? Well, the answer is kind of mind-blowing. They became history's unwitting builders. Think of it this way. These massive, world-changing empires, starting with Babylon, were basically on God's payroll, and they didn't even know it. All their conquests, their road building, their systems of government, they thought they were building their own legacy, but unknowingly, they were just getting the world organized and ready for God's future kingdom. So from this perspective, when you hear people talking about a one-world government or a single global economy, it's not necessarily something to be afraid of. It's seen as these unwitting builders just doing their job, creating this unified global infrastructure that God will eventually inherit and totally repurpose for his own kingdom. And this right here, this is the end game. This is the moment the lease is up. It's the great transfer of assets. Everything the empires of the world have built, all the systems, the infrastructure, the wealth, it all gets handed over. The temporary management of the unwitting employees is over, and the permanent reign of God's kingdom finally begins. So that's a pretty big question, right? If God inherits everything the empires have built, who actually gets the keys? Who's going to run this new global administration? Who are the managers, these stewards of the future? Well, check this out. The job description for these future rulers is not what you might expect. It has nothing to do with power or wealth or military might. It's based entirely on character. It all comes down to how you treat other people, right here, right now. Are you faithful? Are you fair? Do you treat people with love and kindness or with injustice and oppression? That's the real test. And there's actually a name for this group. The book of Daniel calls them the people of the saints of the Most High. They're the ones who are handed the authority to rule when that stone kingdom, the one we saw in the timeline, finally arrives and replaces that long line of world empires. So let's put it all together. Here's how this great transition is supposed to go down. First, the divine stone kingdom comes and completely replaces the world's power structures. Second, the authority to govern is handed over to those faithful stewards who qualified. Third, their reign begins, a reign of true love and justice, right here upon the earth. And finally, this new kind of government sets not just people free, but all of creation from its decay and corruption. And that brings everything right back home to you and me. If this incredible story is true, if all of human history has just been building the stage for a totally new kind of kingdom, then the real question isn't just about what's going to happen, it's about what part you're going to play. The auditions for leadership are happening now. So what role are you preparing for?